I would probably kick myself for making this episode when I was in the thick of my fury and hatred. But nevertheless, I'm here and I'm happy to talk to you today about my experience with learning to thank your enemies. Now, before I get into my particular story and my particular enemy, I'm going to say this. Getting to a place of gratitude for those who have harmed you is very specific to each individual. And if you are not ready to go there, please don't go there. I'm only speaking to you today about my experience with thanking my enemy because I'm ready, because I can see it, because I'm in an odd place of joy and excitement, and I'm ready to let go of my enemy. I'm ready to leave it behind me and move on. And so please know that if you're not ready, you don't have to be ready. But if my experience can help you get there in any way, I am so happy to share it. So today in this episode, I'm going to specifically speak about my husband's ex-wife because, truth be told, she is my greatest enemy. She is the greatest foe I've ever faced. And I think part of the reason for that is because she was an enemy who hurt somebody that I love. It wasn't just an enemy who hurt me. It was somebody who hurt me and someone who I love. It was a monster who was poking holes in the foundation of safety I was finally trying to build. It was a monster who was constantly ripping and tearing at the foundation of my relationship, the best relationship I had ever had in my life. The love that I had needed for so long and finally found, the love that I had triumphed over so many bad relationships and so many horrible areas of my life. Finally, I found love. And the nerve of this monster to try to rip it to shreds? Fuck that, man. And it wasn't just my husband, but she hurt my kids too. When she attacked him at my house, she made my kids feel unsafe in their own home, because they were afraid she was going to come back. This beautiful home, this home that I never thought I would have, this home that I was able to rebuild from my own financial destruction and buy with a partner who I loved. God, that sucked. That sucked so bad. Have you ever had anyone in your life who made it their mission to destroy you and to destroy your happiness? And you don't even know the reason why. You can only speculate, right? Because you would never do something like that. You can only speculate why somebody would make it their mission to just claw at your life. And you can drive yourself crazy trying to guess why. Because I think that's human nature, right? You can drive yourself crazy trying to imagine, what would motivate somebody to threaten my husband, to literally count down and send one number at a time with a threat to call me, to try to tempt my husband back into a relationship that she didn't even want anymore, just for the sheer purpose of making sure she had her victim there to abuse. You can go crazy asking yourself why she would send him texts telling him that she wanted him back and that her house was quiet compared to my noisy one with 6 kids. Why not come there and have peace for a while? Yet flipping the switch and showing up drunk at conferences and sending him into a panic by threatening to hit him by the car with the kids inside. You can go crazy imagining how the person you love was with a monster like that for 15 years. You can go crazy. And I did a little bit, As you've heard in previous episodes, I've quite literally driven myself mad with rage at her for abusing him, for putting him in a position where he felt so panicked to answer her texts on time that he would, at whatever cost, say whatever just to satiate the beast. And as soon as he started to stop, the threats got worse. You can go crazy thinking about somebody like that poisoning the minds of your stepchildren, telling them how awful you are, making you into a liar, turning themselves into the victim. You can go crazy thinking about all the things you've done to try to build a safe foundation for your stepkids and to try to be whatever it is that they need you to be when you know that you're not their biological mom, but you want so badly to fill that role. And you do everything you can. You set all these feelings of rage and fury aside only to find out that they'll run to their mom and tell her, if you fairly discipline them, and then have that mom turn and say, see, I told you, why don't you just come home? You don't need her. You can go crazy. You can. And I did. And as I've shared in previous episodes, when a traumatic incident happens, and somebody in particular attacks you and does these wild things, you can become very obsessed with them. And it's for many reasons, but it's because, your mind is constantly trying to piece together how to keep this threat away. Your mind is constantly trying to tell you that they're not a threat. And one of the ways your mind does that is through comparison, by telling you how much better you are than this threat. And what that looks like in the, maybe back in our caveman times, this served a purpose, right? Building up your confidence and your strength. So if that enemy ever physically attacked you, you could overpower them and you'd be ready. But what that looks like in the modern world, right, is more of a comparison on looks, career, status, mental stability, all that stuff. That's more what it looks like now. And it doesn't serve. All of it does is teach you how to be obsessed with this person. And depending on whatever your situation is, if anybody has ever traumatized or abused you, maybe you know what I'm talking about, where you just become obsessed. Or maybe it hasn't gone as far as trauma and abuse, but it's somebody who is kind of out to get you, meaning like they'll do anything they can to jab at your self-confidence or jab at your accomplishments just to knock you down a peg. Anybody who just wants to raise themselves above you, who lives that life, you can maybe relate to that kind of torment and becoming obsessed with one-upping them, with protecting yourselves. I mean, that's kind of what our enemies are, right? They're anybody who threatens who we are and what we're trying to make and makes us feel like we're not enough. And in my case, going through years worth of somebody abusing my husband, there was a lot to be obsessed over. There was a lot to be protective over. And finding that balance between, protective behavior and just living a life of peace was really challenging. And now that I'm on the other side of, my husband recognizing he was abused, right? And safe, and I have comfort in knowing he's never going to enter back into that relationship again. Now we're on the other side of legal protection from this abusive person. I'm left with all of these, pathways that have been built to constantly think about her and think about, what is she going to do next? How am I going to protect my family next? And it just gets to a point where it doesn't serve anymore. And so that's the kind of situation that I'm dealing with, that I'm trying to let go, and I am ready to let go. And so to tell you how I'm getting to a place of gratitude with all of this, I want to dive in a little bit to how I got to that place. I've mentioned before that I underwent EMDR therapy, right? And that's a particular form of therapy that works with eye movement, or in my case, I used these I would hold them. They were about the size of like a computer mouse, and I would hold one in each hand and my therapist would buzz them. And so it would be like a little vibration in my hands. As she would, take me back into the traumatic memory. She would have it at one speed, and then when she was trying to help me reframe the memory to one of peace and confidence, she would change the speed. And all of it works with the brain to help you reprocess trauma and see yourself as the hero rather than the victim. That's the best way that I can describe it. And I signed up for this therapy so that I could feel safe in my home again. Because after she attacked my house, I was so paranoid. I would look out every time a car drove past. I would envision her coming to the door and banging again. I would be nervous constantly about her coming back. I wasn't comfortable even taking out my trash. I would constantly sit in the same place that I was on the couch when she came to attack and watch, because that's what I did that night. I was watching, I was ready when she came to attack, and I didn't want to live like that anymore. Nobody wants to feel unsafe in their own home. Like I said before, my goal for this house was to make a place of peace and creativity for my husband and my kids and I. That's what I wanted. I didn't want to constantly live with my guard up. So I willingly entered this form of therapy because I'm like, we're reprocessing this shit. We're doing it. And my therapist helped me get from a place of I am in danger to a place of I can create my own safety. And here's where the first piece of gratitude comes. The mind is a beautiful, magical place, and we have this beautiful protective ability to store our traumas, right? So that we can move on and we can survive. Well, when I entered EMDR therapy, I went with the intention of reprocessing the specific trauma that she caused. But during the sessions, I was kind of prompted to dive further into my past and reprocess some other traumas from my own abusive relationships and reframe those from I am in danger to I can create my own safety. I didn't even realize some of these traumas were still holding me back. And I'm going to say that because when I reflect on my life, I definitely was walking around with a victim mentality still of I'm in danger, threats are everywhere, I'm only going to get hurt. And it was because of carrying around some of the past abusive relationships I had. I kind of thought because I fled quickly, and I did flee quickly, that I was okay. I was in the clear. I got out of it. I'm set. But my brain had stored several of those very painful memories to constantly create this narrative of I am in danger. And I never would have explored that had I not been moved to go to therapy because of what she had done. Now, let me say this. I hope it's becoming clear. Really, I'm grateful to myself, right? I'm grateful to myself because I was the one who did the work at therapy, right? I was the one who went. I was the one who genuinely dived in. But framing it in, hey, I never would have done that if she wouldn't have attacked, helps with making the enemy seem less successful in their intent to tear you down. By saying, no, you didn't tear me down, you actually helped me heal even more powerfully. That takes away the sting of the nerve of what they've done. So that is the first way that I'm grateful to my enemy. I never would have gone to EMDR therapy and healed from some even deeper traumas if she hadn't done what she had done. And on that note, I'm a huge advocate for EMDR therapy, and I've been able to recommend that to some of my friends and former colleagues who needed some help. I am able to say, hey, I've done this, you got to do it, and they've written it down. And so I'm grateful to her because not only did her actions help me heal from the past, but they also have now helped other people because I was able to share my experience of EMDR therapy with them and even perhaps motivate them to go and seek that for themselves. So it's healing for me and healing for others. And I gotta tell you, it feels so good. I can feel it in my body right now. I'm excited expressing this gratitude. Whereas in my body, when I used to think of this enemy, I would be jittery. I'd want to jump out of my skin. I'd be angry, antsy, anxious, ready to panic. Now I'm excited because her destructive actions have on one hand turned into deep healing for me and for others. So that's the first thing I'm grateful for, the healing that came as a result of what my enemy has done. The second thing that I'm grateful for is the creativity that has been sparked from what my enemy has done. You all know that I recently published a story called She Death's Reflection. And it is a magical realism novella that's follows the narrator, whose name is Alex, on this journey of kind of diving into this mystical place where she's facing this she-death monster who's abusing and trying to drag her down. But she's also having these mystical conversations with angelic-like beings who are trying to help her get to her higher path. And there's this common theme of the narrator, Alex, carrying seeds. Seeds that she-death, the abusive monster, gave her. Seeds of ego, death itself, isolation, pain, all this stuff, because that's what trauma does. That's what abusive people do. They make you feel isolated. They make you feel alone. They make you feel hopeless. And these were all chipped and broken seeds that this monster gave to the narrator. But the narrator discovers through her conversations with these angelic beings that she can take these seeds and plant them with her own light, with her own beauty, with her own passion, compassion, peace, right? All the things that combat evil. And she can grow something more beautiful and far-reaching than what the enemy ever intended. And that has been such a beautiful thing to create. And it's all obviously very symbolic, right? For these nasty intentions that my husband's ex had for me and had for him and our family. It's symbolic of taking those intentions and putting your own light over them to grow something beautiful instead. And some of the real life beautiful things that have grown are compassion. It was very hard for me to have compassion for my husband, both for like what happened while we were together with his ex, just with, needing to satiate her and all that stuff. But also I judged him. Like, I'll admit it. I straight up judged him for being with her for so long. And that felt shitty. Nobody likes to be a judgy person, right? I did not feel good judging my husband for his past. That sucked, especially because he was an abuse victim. And I didn't like feeling like that. And I had to examine, where was that coming from? Why was I looking through eyes of judgment? And that took me on a whole journey of discovering that I needed to have compassion for myself and my past. I couldn't have compassion for him and his past because I judged my own. I was ashamed of myself and my past. I couldn't extend compassion for something that I wasn't feeling for myself. And so this seed that his ex wanted to plant of discord in our lives, right? Of bringing his past into our present. I took that seed and planted it and grew one instead of compassion for myself and my past and my husband and his past. And mind you, these are daily journeys, right? Like, this did not happen overnight. It's taken years, months, therapy, writing, but it's happening. And it's beautiful and incredibly powerful. And so the second thing that I'm grateful for from my enemy is this story that I wrote about taking the evil, vile things of the world and planting them with your own light and creating something of beauty that in turn creates a more compassionate world. And that sort of transcended into the real world of my family by, instead of being a judgmental person, I learned to be more compassionate. And I wouldn't have had to learn that lesson of compassion if she didn't try so hard to insert herself into my relationship with my husband. If she didn't try so hard to pull him back into her abusive web, I never would have been motivated to see the whole situation through compassionate eyes from my husband, to look at his past with compassion and learn how to look at my past with compassion. So again, in this moment, like, really, I'm grateful for myself and the work that I did, right? But I can say that I'm grateful to her because, again, it sort of takes away the sting of her intentions, which were to destroy, and instead flips her intentions to something beautiful. So I'm grateful for the healing that's come from her abusive actions, and I'm grateful for the creativity that's come from her abusive actions, both the creativity with my relationship, making it one that's built on compassion and, understanding, but also the creativity that came from She Death's reflection, because that story isn't just about the narrator and that monster. That story extends to the areas of our culture that need to change, right? Like not having a culture that's founded on narcissism, instead having one that's founded on circles, right? And living in a world where we actually value the contributions of others and we listen. We don't just put one person and their needs on top. All of this beauty came from the destruction that she tried to create. So I'm grateful for healing and I'm grateful for creativity. And to be honest, the third one kind of relates to the first two, but it's its own thing. I'm grateful for the growth that's coming from it. What started as a dream of just wanting to escape from her has turned into quite a beautiful path that my husband and I want to forge. When we talked about wanting to move somewhere warm and live our dreams, it kind of started as just like, yeah, we want to leave this place behind. We don't want to worry about seeing her around every corner. He doesn't want to remember the ways that he felt, with all of these environmental triggers nearby. It started as just wanting to escape the painful present. But it turned into, well, we don't just want to move to escape. We want to move to build our own life. And what exactly is it that we want from our own life? Because let me tell you something, living a life that feels yucky, and when I say yucky, I mean living a life where you're obsessively talking about this person who's ruining your life. When you realize how gross that feels in your body and in your mind and on your tongue, it motivates you to ask yourself, what do I actually want? How do I want to live? Oh, I want to live a life that's my own. I want to live a life where the things that I talk about are my dreams, are my own creative endeavors, where I look out the window and I see a palm tree that I want to write a poem about instead of looking out the window and seeing taillights and being triggered by memories of when hers backed into our driveway. Okay. So it starts to motivate you to fix on what you actually want. When your life is being stolen from you or when someone's trying to steal your life, the soul has a beautiful way of giving that life wings so that you can rise above it and live a life in the sky, far away from all of the triggers. But also you're in the sky, right? You're surrounded by all the beautiful things that take flight. And so the third thing, this growth piece, living this life where you feel gross, where you feel invaded, kind of leads you to want to set roots somewhere where you can build something that is made out of you, not out of your desire to escape. And on that note, I have one fourth and final thing that I am grateful for from, my enemy. And that fourth and final thing is that it's sort of, that fourth and final thing is the mission to just make the world a better place. As I expressed in my interview with my husband, domestic violence against men is not nearly talked about as it should be, and there are not nearly as many resources as there should be out there. But my husband and I have found a way to use this story, this horrible story, which she intended for only destruction, as a platform for speaking out against this issue, as a platform for my being able to create a creative story that might speak to people, as a platform to show that abuse against men is monstrous and it is real and something needs to change. It needs to get better. There need to be more resources. It's become a platform. It's become a launching point. And the story of She Death's reflection has sparked other stories about monsters, has kind of fueled this passion that's now entirely my own to expose the monstrous things of the world and hopefully create a world that is more equal and peaceful for everyone. When you have to fight so hard for your own peace, you kind of want to create a world of peace. You kind of don't want it to happen again to anybody else. And so she's kind of sparked this mission, something that is born of this desire to make the world better for everybody, to make more resources out there. And so to kind of wrap up, my advice for how to make your enemy's actions your own, it all centers on growth. And when you have to ask yourself questions, right? Like, why am I so obsessed with this person? Why is this person still hurting me? Why is this so painful? Why is this so addictive? When you have to ask yourself those questions, you start to see the areas of your life where you need to grow, or the areas of your life that maybe need healing and compassion. And then slowly you transform into somebody beautiful who you're proud of, and it becomes easier and easier to walk away from that addiction of talking about them, of fixating on them, and instead you start to fixate on what you're doing. So I say gratitude for your enemy, but really it's gratitude for yourself. And it kind of all goes hand in hand. The key is to focus on you and what you're doing with what they've done, because you can control that. Right? It doesn't get under your skin because you have full say over what you do with what they've done. But the way that's really freeing for you is to look back on their actions and look on their past and go, thank you. I never would have become this person had you not tried to destroy me. And again, you're really thanking yourself, but thanking them too is so freeing. And I can tell you with confidence now that I am so ready to leave her behind. I'm ready to leave this trauma behind. I'm ready to focus on something so much bigger, so much more beautiful. I'm ready to focus now on what I can create. What else can I make? If I can turn this nasty situation into a beautiful work of art that helps others, what else could I make? What else could grow? If I can grow this beauty from evil, what could I grow from peace? There are so many beautiful things that have come from processing what my enemy has done. And so again, as you do the same, just start asking yourself questions. That's where you start. You ask yourself questions of, why is this bothering me? And you start to notice the times where you are getting wrapped up in conversation about them, or where you're really fixating on what they've done, and you ask yourself why. You create that awareness, and then you start focusing on, okay, who am I in this? What can I control? And if I don't want a life like what they're trying to put on me, a life of obsession and destruction and abuse, what is it that I want? And how can I make it? Our enemies can be powerful, but we are the ones who hold the keys to how much power we give them. We control our minds. We control our thoughts. And we have much more power than we think we do to grow from the evil actions of others and to make a world, to make a life that's based on our values, peace and joy. I want to thank you so much for listening today, and I hope that part of my journey with gratitude for my enemy can give you some ideas for how to eventually get there with your own. Thank you again for listening, and I'm so excited to talk to you next time.